Hey there, art nerds. Today I have a review especial that I am really excited to share with you guys. I'm going to be taking a look at some of the watercolors that I've ordered off of AliExpress. You guys might remember these from a haul video. I'll link that in the cards to refresh your memory. But what we're looking at today is the Supervision 3-piece set. So it's the primary yellow, the Quin Magenta, and the Phthalo Blue, as well as 3 of the CAAM or Supervision super granulating colors. So we have a half pan over here of cathedral glass, and then we have 2 tubes over to the left. Now all of these are made and released by Supervision. I'm taking a look at the professional Supervision watercolors. There are also studio Supervision watercolors. I didn't really think it was necessary to review the studio. I wanted to focus on the professional. So in the 3-piece set, we receive primary yellow, Quinacridone Magenta, and Phthalo Blue. It includes a pigment manual that lists out most of the colors in their lineup, but it does not include the super granulating colors that we're going to talk about a little later on. This is released by Z&S International Group Limited, and it is by Hang Zhao Zhang's Stationery Company Limited. So most of the information is written in Chinese, which I can't read. I could pull out Google Translate for y'all. If there is interest in the comments below, if you guys want to see me translate this, I'll do a stream where we use Google Translate to try and decipher what's going on here. But most of this seems to be pigment information. The paints came in a nice little plastic box, and each are individually wrapped with their name in several different languages, pigment, and lightfastness information. So quite a handy little box there. So we do need scissors or an X-Acto blade to slit it open, since the band goes all the way around and keeps it nice and shut in transit. And you can see the Supervision logo if you look closely on the band, as well as on each individual watercolor half pan. So what is also neat is with these, they also describe where the raw materials came from. So for primary yellow, PY1, the source of the raw materials are Italy and the USA. It's made in China. It's a series 1, it's a light fastness of 7, and it's fully transparent. For the Quin Magenta, it is PR122. The source of the raw materials are Italy and the US, but it was made in China. It's series 3. It has a light fastness of 8, and it's fully transparent. And then for Phthalo Blue, it uses PB15, which is a pretty common pigment for Phthalo Blue. The source of the raw materials is Italy and the US. It's made in China. It's a series 2. It has a light fastness of 8, and it's fully transparent. If you're interested in Supervision watercolors, I really recommend these little 3-piece sets, because they're a good way to play around with them and see if this is a good fit for you before you invest in a larger set. I also like the presentation of these watercolors. They're very professionally made, they're put together, and it seems like they're designed to appeal to an international market. In my It Came from AliExpress Part 2 video, where we looked at even more watercolor papers from AliExpress, I kind of talked to you guys about my methods for shopping from AliExpress, which vendors I prefer to purchase from, and how I kind of prevent myself from getting taken advantage of too badly. I'll link that in the description below. I really recommend it to anybody who's interested in buying from AliExpress. I will also link where I purchase these paints. I try to do that anytime I can. I try to get the exact listing when possible. Sometimes that's just not possible though. Sometimes listings do get pulled, so I always do the best that I can. There will also be prices listed in the description below, as well as a transcript of this video. So the paints themselves are wrapped with a sticky adhesive belly band, and then they're shrink wrapped with plastic wrapping. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to reutilize that adhesive belly band to attach the pigment and color information to the half pans themselves. Since they're already adhesive, that makes it pretty simple. Next, we're going to take a look at the Super Granulating Watercolor. We received 1/2 pan in Cathedral Glass and 2 tubes in Green Purple and Rose Ash. There's several different colors available, and some are only available, it seems, in half pans, some are available in half pans and tubes, and some are only available in tubes. One thing I found frustrating is none of the listings I was looking at made it clear whether I was receiving a half pan or a tube. For me personally, I would have preferred to receive 3 tubes, but for the purposes of review, it is convenient that I got a half pan because it allows us to explore the format for both the tubes and for the half pans. The half pan was about half the price of the tube, but each tube can fill a half pan several times over, as you guys will see here. So Cathedral Glass is a Series 1 watercolor. It includes the pigments PB29 and PY65. It is a light fastness of 7 and it's semi-transparent. Green Purple is a Series 5 PV23. It's semi-transparent. Its light fast is listed as Outlist. Y'all let me know down in the comments below what Outlist means. And Rose Ash is a Series 5 PB36. It's semi-transparent and its light fast is also Outlist. The tubes are 15 millimeters. They are metal with a plastic cap. The color seems to pour easily, and there's no strange smells with any of these watercolors, which is really nice to see. So for today's unbox and swatch review, we're going to be swatching on the Paul Rubens 100% Cotton Rag watercolor block. I happen to really like this block. I did a review of this block not too long ago. I hope you guys will check it out. And I've also reviewed the Paul Rubens 2 bins and field tested them, and I hope you'll check that out as well if you're looking for more great watercolors on a budget from China. So another reason I decided to swatch on this block is this block really loves granulating colors, and I thought they'd be a perfect fit for the super granulating watercolors. So one thing to keep in mind is if I really like the granulating colors, I'm going to order more and report back. So we're starting with the CMY set. The colors are quick to activate, rich and saturated. They're finely milled and very satisfying to use. So let's try doing some direct mixing. So first I'm applying some swatches to the paper. We're going to let those dry. These are going to be our optical mixing text. And then we're going to do some direct mixing, mixing our yellow with our cyan blue, our yellow with our magenta. And direct mixing results in fairly clean mixes, partially because these are very finely granulated. I love the purple I'm able to achieve with the phthalo and the magenta. And these colors are staining rather than lifting. Now, since these colors are so saturated, it is difficult to tell how well they mix as optical mixes. So while those dry, I'm moving on to our super granulating colors. And surprisingly, Cathedral Glass, and that's the half pan you see here, doesn't really granulate out all that much. I also tried it in plain water, as you can see here, to see if that kind of helps. It does actually encourage more granulation than a straight up application. Sometimes allowing the paint to dry and it settle down into the cracks and nooks and crannies and valleys on the paper helps bring out the granulation. So next we're going to do the 2 tube granulating colors. We're going to start with Green Purple. So here it is, a Green Purple. I thought this would make for a very interesting granulation blend. And I'm going to use it from the half pan, although it is still very wet, as you can see here in the half pan. And then we're going to re-swatch it a few days later to see how well it reconstitutes. Now, Green Purple is just not that exciting at first, but it does separate out eventually. And I think these are some of the few watercolors where I want them to separate out. And to be fair, super granulating colors are not unusual. They're really cool. I reviewed a few of them on the channel. I really like the Van Gogh super granulating colors where you have a PBK, a black, and you have a different color. There was a green, a pink, a purple, I want to say a yellow. Those are really cool, and I was really interested in what Supervision had to offer regarding these sort of super granulating colors, especially because the super granulating colors, it's not just a color in black, it's two different colors. So Rose Ash, that's the color you guys see me messing with here, separates the most even in a straight application. And the most striking effects seem to be in plain water, and the color is allowed to separate naturally. All right, so our optical blending swatches have finally had a chance to dry. So I'm going to layer on the second color. And as I mentioned earlier, because these colors are so saturated, it's really difficult to tell how well they're going to mix as optical mixes. I think I would need a separate palette and to be able to apply much less color because these are very, very saturated. And then we could better tell how well these blend as optical mixes. So now that the Supervision CMY colors have had a chance to dry, I'm going to try to lift them and freak my camera out in the process. And these are very, very staining colors, so they're not going to lift, and that's because they are very finely granulated. So these are more likely to stay on your paper layer after layer, but if you make a mistake, you're not going to be able to lift them up. So I allowed my half pans to dry several days. I'm reconstituting them with a little bit of water. It does take a while to reactivate, but they do reactivate. Just be patient with them. I think Rose Ash reactivates better than when it went down directly from the tube. If you're like me and you prefer to work from dry watercolors, these will work fine. So now that the first swatches have had a chance to dry, I hope you guys can see what initially drew me to these watercolors. We're getting two different colors when they sediment out. With Cathedral Glass, it's a green and it's a dark blue and a green. With the green purple, it is a green and a purple. And with the Rose Ash, it's a really vibrant red and kind of a muted blue. I apologize that the exposure is so blown out on this shot. It does make it a little bit difficult to see what I'm doing, but I'm applying a lot of water onto our watercolor paper, and I'm just going to dip some of our super granulating colors into this body of water, and I want to see how well these kind of separate out, because this seems like the best application. If you want this sort of super granulation, if you want this super sedimentation, dabbing them into a pool of water or dabbing them onto wet watercolor paper seems like the best way to encourage that to happen. And this is a hyperlapse of them drying, so you guys can see the colors sedimenting out as the water evaporates into the atmosphere. Can really see how striking the colors are as they dry. So now I want to try lifting our super granulating colors, and probably to no one's surprise, they are fairly lifting. I think part of that is how granulating you are. You have particles of different sizes, and that's why you get that really interesting sedimentation, but they are very prone to lifting. Now the smaller particles are like with the Rose Ash, the red and the blue. The smaller particles are going to be the ones that are more likely to stain, and those are going to be the ones that are more likely to stay behind on the paper when you've lifted off the larger particles. That could make for some really interesting lifting techniques and special effects as well. So I like these things so much that I ended up ordering more Supervision watercolors, both half pans and these granulating paints, because I really enjoyed swatching them and I want to really give them a fair field test. So I hope you guys will keep an eye out for the full field test, but guess what? I have combined the two videos into one. So in the back half of the video, I have the newly arrived, the newest arrivals of Supervision super granulating paints from AliExpress. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with you guys. Before we jump into that though, I do want to give a huge Thank you to my amazing patrons on Patreon. They're the folks that make these unboxing swatches, these reviews possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys can check out their names of some really cool people at the end of this video. So about a month later, I was able to record the second part of this unboxing swatch because the rest of my watercolors came in from AliExpress. So we have here not just some super granulating watercolors. I actually have just one tube of that, I think, but also we have some mineral watercolors to check out today as well. So I have 4 tubes of the Supervision mineral watercolors. We've got the old tube body and the new tube body, as well as 2 half pans. And we have 1 tube of the super granulating watercolors to talk about today. We also have coming up in another video a 12 color CAAM Supervision watercolor review. So these are going to be like those CMY watercolors we took a look at the beginning of the video. So the mineral watercolors, there's several colors and mineral pigments available, but I purchased what I felt were the most striking colors. So I bought lapis lazuli in a half pan. It's series 8 with a light fastness of 8 and a transparency of opaque. I purchased crystal vermilion in half pan. It's series 9 with a light fast of LF8 and the transparency is also opaque. I purchased malachite in an 8 milliliter metal tube. It is series M4 with a light fastness of 5 stars and it's transparent. And I purchased dinosaur fossil brown in an 8 milliliter metal tube. It's series 6. It is transparent and it has a light fastness of 5 little asterisk stars. So the half pans have the distinctive Supervision packaging and most of the writing is in Chinese. In this instance though, I do utilize Google Translate to tell us what's on these half pans, what's going on with these. So these are packaged very similarly to the CMY watercolors that we took a look at, as well as to that 1 half pan of super granulating watercolors. The lapis lazuli has a really rough, distinctive texture, whereas the crystal vermilion is a little bit smoother. So I want to translate the back of the package for each paint, and I'm going to use Google Translate to help me out with that. So for lapis lazuli, which is the one we're starting with, it says Supervision, China Academy of Art, Art Museum's only cooperating brand, Shiju product name, Shijui Masterclass Semi-Solid Watercolor Paint, manufacturer China Hangzhou Kanxi Stationery Co. Limited. It gives an address in Hangzhou, and the ingredients are gum arabic, toner, acacia honey, beef bile, and glycerin. And I imagine the beef bile is like oxgall, and that oxgall, and that's to get those super granulating effects. So you guys can see me using Google Translate here to translate some photos. I find that using photos gives you the most accurate translation. So that's what I'm going with. You guys can see that translation here. You can pause the video if you'd like to read it for yourself, but I did read it for you. And it's mostly just address information with some ingredient information, but it's cool that we were able to do that. Then for crystal vermilion, it is Supervision. Product name, Shiju Professional Grade Semi-Block Solid Watercolor Paint. Raw material origin, Italy, the United States. Producer, British Z&S International Group, UK, London. And then we have more address information. Supplier, Hangzhou Zhangxi Stationery Co. Limited. They give the Chinese address as well. And then the ingredients for crystal vermilion are listed as Arabic gum, toner, photic honey, beef bile, and glycerin. So they actually have slightly different ingredients between the 2 half pans. Now I want to keep that important information where I can actually utilize it, and I really like the packaging for Supervision half pan watercolors because I can just repurpose it a little bit, and I have these really slick looking half pans that have all the information I need, and I don't have to write super tiny. So next up, we're taking a look at the metal tubes for the malachite and the dinosaur fossil brown, and I am pretty sure it's not utilizing actual dinosaur fossils, but the color is a really pretty brown, and I just couldn't help but laugh at the name. Honestly, it is maybe at best dirt from maybe an excavation site. So both of these just want to ooze out of the tube. So I had to recap it while I grabbed some half pans, and they just flow very easily into the half pan. So we have a little set of 4 here. Next, we're going to take a look at our super granulating color. So this is a green and brown, or really it's brown green, I believe. It is also super oozy. What I don't like is that it doesn't have the same pigment information on the tube, or I couldn't find the same pigment information on the tube as I was able to find on the other super granulating watercolors. So I'm going to start by swatching my super granulating color. And I'm doing that on the same sheet we did our other super granulating swatches on. And brown green is a series 4 watercolor in a 15 milliliter tube. It is semi-transparent, and the tube lists the light fastness as Outlast. It swatches from wet decently, but based on the past 3 granulating swatches, I'm betting this one swatches better dry. So for the mineral pigments, these swatch really cool, especially when they're wet. I'm swatching this in the Baohang Academy watercolor pad. This is 100% cotton rag watercolor paper, and this is also a watercolor paper that I purchased from AliExpress and have reviewed on the channel, so you guys can check out that review here. There's definitely opacity to the colors that you'd kind of expect to be more opaque, like malachite and vermilion, which are traditionally more opaque in Chinese watercolor palettes. And the dinosaur fossil brown has a really neat darker brown under granulation. The lapis is just a really nice lapis lazuli with some granulation. So once I finish swatching these, so we have a gradiated wash swatch. We also have mass tone swatches to give you guys an idea of the actual color as well as how these granulate and their opacity, because that's all important information to know if you're a watercolor artist. You want to know what you're dealing with. I'm going to let the two tube watercolors dry in half pans to see how well they reconstitute, because you only have to get burned by Daniel Smith Mayan Blue once to know that some colors are gorgeous straight from the tube, and once they've had a chance to dry out, there is no salvaging them. They will never re-wet again. So after a few days, I came back and I re-swatched them. And they seem to re-swatch pretty decently from the half pans. I had no real discernible issues getting malachite and dinosaur fossil brown to reconstitute. In fact, dinosaur fossil brown was a little bit richer, a little bit more intense after it had a chance to dry in the half pan. So something I want to point out for you guys is that I am a watercolor comic artist and watercolor illustrator. So when I'm reviewing watercolors, I'm reviewing them from my own personal bias as a comic artist and an illustrator. There's certain things I look for when I'm painting that other artists may not be as concerned about. So now I'm attempting a lift test. I am not surprised that all of these were fairly lifting. They're all very pigmented, but they are also not finely granulated. So they granulate, not finely milled, so they do granulate a lot. And I've noticed that super granulating colors that tend to be more opaque, do tend to be more prone to lifting. So I also did a re-swatch on the brown green after it had a chance to dry in the half pan, and it doesn't granulate as much from dried half pan as it does from the tube. So this is a semi-moist sort of watercolor. It would work best in a semi-moist palette like some of the palettes we've talked about here on the channel. It does still granulate out though. It's just a finer granulation that may work better for everyday use. It's somewhat lifting, but not as lifting as some of the other granulating colors. So today we've talked about a lot of different watercolors from Supervision. We've talked about the standard CMY watercolors from Supervision, and I look forward to reviewing this 12-pan set of Supervision professional watercolors in the near future. So I really hope you guys will keep an eye out for that review. I'm really excited about that. And part of the reason why I'm excited about that is, in general, Supervision colors seem really cool. These super granulating colors offer something that I think is very unusual, particularly in the US. You don't see a whole lot of that in the US, although I think Paul Rubens is offering some super granulating colors as well. They're available in tubes as well as in half pans. My complaint with AliExpress is I could not tell which I was getting. I couldn't tell if I was getting a smaller tube. I couldn't tell if I was getting a half pan or if I was getting a tube until they arrived and I unboxed it and I saw it. So that is one nitpick. I'd like more clarity. We also took a look at the Supervision mineral watercolors, and I know most watercolors are derived from mineral-based pigments, at least in traditional palettes, but these really champion their source, and there are more colors available in the mineral line than what I have shown here. And I would like to purchase more of the mineral watercolors to share with you guys and to play around with. I really fell in love with the Dinosaur Fossil Brown in this set. It's a beautiful brown color, although none of them are shabby. Crystal Vermilion's beautiful, Malachite's gorgeous, and Lapis Lazuli is a really nice Lapis Lazuli. So Supervision makes some really great watercolors. So far, I'm really impressed with what Supervision has to offer. The Supervision Professional and Y, M, and C are very finely granulated. I'm looking forward to seeing how a set of 12 handles, but I have high hopes for them. The super granulating colors are really neat and a fun addition to most watercolor artist studios. While not ideal for mixing, there are some fun special effects watercolors that stand out on their own. I've noticed that Paul Rubens is also offering these and would be interested in comparing the two. I'm looking forward to field testing these, and I'll need to think of something that will really showcase how cool they are. While there are super granulating colors available in the US, like Daniel Smith's Undersea Green being one of my favorites, I think these add a fun twist. The mineral pigment watercolors are expensive but fun. They're not really innovative. They're more for rockhounds like myself who might be too lazy to grind their own pigments. These are really reminiscent of traditional Chinese watercolor palettes, particularly malachite and cinnabar. In general, I'm really excited by what I've seen of Supervision and have been really happy with my orders from AliExpress. I talk about this more in one of my paper reviews, but AliExpress doesn't have to be a minefield. It can be a gold mine if you know how to look. So I just want to point out I was not compensated in any way, shape, or form for this review. All materials were selected by me, purchased by me, and with the purposes of finding something cool to add to my collection. And I did indeed find several cool things today. I think Supervision has a lot to offer. I want to try out some of their dye-based watercolors that they have listed on AliExpress, and I would love to collect more of the super granulating and the mineral-based watercolors as well. Keep an eye out for the upcoming Supervision 12 color review. Let me know what you guys liked in this review down in the description below. Which was your favorite of the 3 different types of watercolor we talked about today? And let me know if there are any great watercolors that I might have missed that you would love to see how I handle or what my thoughts on them are. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I had so much fun unboxing and swatching all of these CAAM Supervision watercolors. I'm so delighted that I can share them with you guys. Hopefully I've turned you on to something new and something cool. And I hope you found this useful, helpful, and informative. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!